Hi guys, today we're going to look at stringing a Strat. This has got modern tuners, so the ones with the holes through them as opposed to the vintage ones which you see on a lot of Strats as well. We've started with the strings off here, so for those of you that don't know, we will be taking the strings off in some of the other videos, in the Gibson ones for instance, but just as a quick guide, tune it down, so tune it flat to get the strings a bit more sort of slack so they're not pinging off in your face. Take them out of the tuners at the top, cut them, and then flip it over and pull them out of the back here. But as I say, we'll go through that in more detail next time, but I'm sure you won't sort of struggle.
Yeah, and you do need to cut them on the Strat because they won't come through the bridge very easily.
Absolutely.
Okay, when they're coiled.
Absolutely.
So we're just using some Ernie Ball regular slinkies on here, which are 10s. So what I'm going to start doing is just put them through the block.
Right, I'm going to grab my camera and we'll get some lovely close-ups of this. Okay, so in through the block at the back there.
Yep. And just pull them all the way through. So the ball end of the string is all the way through the bridge. Pull it tight. We will double check that when we've got all the strings on.
Great. This is the kind of the tedious part, but
I tend to put it on my shoulder like this.
Well,
because then you can just pull them straight through. And also doing them all at the same time means that the guitar is on the bench or wherever you're doing it and on your shoulder.
Sure.
Rather than putting one on, putting it back on the neck stand or what have you, and then stringing that up.
Absolutely.
If you put them all through, it's a little easier.
Yeah, and it's kind of more like a production line. You're doing the same thing over and over again, which means you sort of get used to doing it and it saves you time. I should point out very quickly that certain Strats you're going to load through the sort of bottom of the bridge here on hardtails. They're kind of relatively uncommon, I guess.
Yeah, they're very few and far between, but this is all for all sort of floating bridge style guitars. Okay, so I'm just going to pull all the strings and I'm just going to make sure they're fully
so
in the
just
bridge.
Sort of making sure the ball end is in the right position.
Okay. Tend to just put them all over one side.
Yeah.
And with our string winder,
let's have a close look at that.
Okay. This is really handy just for speed, really. Okay.
Sure.
What I've already done is just line up the tuner holes. Okay.
Okay. So if you guys can see, all of the holes are actually pointing straight down the guitar.
And also what you'll see is there's two tall tuners, okay, and then these four are slightly shorter and what they call staggered.
Sure.
Okay, and what that will do will mean that the string is coming off the back of the nut at more of an angle, which is what you want when you put a wrap around the string, around the tuning post.
So the nut is this sort of
this is the nut where the string
plastic
sits in.
or bone bit at the top here.
And what you'll see, these are the modern style, and some modern styles will be like this all the way.
Sure. So all of the tall ones.
All of the tall ones.
Okay.
This type of Fender, US Fender of a certain period, will have these tuners a little bit more staggered. Okay?
Fair enough. Okay.
So starting with the bass string, what we're going to do is push the string through the tuner.
Yep.
Pull it fairly taut.
Okay.
And then with your thumb and forefinger, you want to pull down on the string.
Sure.
Two tuners.
So you've
two and a little bit tuners.
Two and a little bit tuners
for your length, and then pull it back.
Yep.
Put a little kink in it.
Okay, perfect. Okay. So just to clarify there, guys, so you pull the string through, and then you're pulling it back through, keeping it kind of sort of with your right hand, I guess in this case. And then that just allows you to have the right amount of wind on the string.
Yeah, and the reason why the right amount of wind on the string is important is so that the string winds down the tuner.
Yep.
Which then promotes that angle off the back of the nut.
Sure. So with Fender guitars, they've got an inline headstock generally.
Yeah.
I mean, almost without exception.
So on the bass side, or rather the wound strings, you can actually get a break angle behind the nut with the right amount of wraps around the tuning post.
And the break angle being the sort of angle that it comes off the nut at.
Absolutely, yeah. And it should be coming back.
Sure.
When when a string is too straight through the nut, you can get some open string buzzing.
Okay.
Okay. So on Fenders, they often have this, the string tree.
So the string tree is this thing here.
Pull the high B and E down. Okay.
And you sometimes get them on the middle two strings as well, don't you? On
That's
the G
correct.
and the D.
Yeah. It's sort of partly why these staggered tuners on this modern style, to try to enforce that string coming down.
Enforce the break angle, I see. So I know that when I first started playing, I didn't know, well, I could see what the string tree was for, but I didn't know why you used it, kind of thing. So it's to make sure that you've got a lovely sort of steep angle on the nut here, and just to stop buzzing, and it also gives you a nice clean, it makes you come off the front end of the nut, is
exactly,
that right?
Which is where your intonation, your tuning across the neck is starting from. It's not starting in the middle of the nut or at the back end of the nut.
I see. So
on the leading edge of that nut.
Effectively, what you're saying is if the break angle, if the string doesn't come off the leading edge of the nut, so the sort of guitar side of the nut, if you like, then effectively what you're doing is essentially moving the frets relative to the
but by a small amount. But around the open chord positions, it's certainly enough to pick up on some intonation flaws if it's wildly out.
So don't be tempted to sort of ignore the string tree. It's there for a reason, basically.
Yeah, absolutely. And with a good 2 or 3 wraps around a tuning post, which you'll be able to do on these first two, the E and the A.
Yeah.
One, we'll be able to get a good break angle, but the 3 wraps around those tuning posts, the 2 to 3 wraps around those tuning posts, should hold the string too.
Sure.
So it's more stable.
I see. And what you've done there is you've moved it about sort of half a centimetre away from the notch that you've just made.
That's just so I can cut the string cleanly.
Nice.
If you do it like that, you'll end up cutting it there. And it will be pointing up.
Exactly.
Okay. And then all pointing down. And what you can see on some guitars over time, where they've been wound round, they have little score marks on the headstock. So if you can do that, and let me show you, just start to wind this.
Okay.
So we're coming round. This is where I just put a bit of tension on the string.
So that's with your spare hand, you're sort of pulling very gently to keep it sort of straight.
Yeah, and the reason we want to do that is just so it's tight around that tuning post.
Sure.
So as you see it come round now, it's very nice and tight to the tuning post.
Sure, and I guess you've got to be very careful to get that string, keep it winding under. You don't want it crisscrossing over all the time.
No, this will go all the way down the tuning post.
Perfect. So nice and neat.
Yeah. So there's a good 3 wraps around that tuning post.
Great.
I'm just going to cut them with the cutters here. Okay.
Fantastic, yep.
The other thing about having that just coming straight out is that the only thing I'm going to hit with these cutters is this nut.
Sure.
Whereas if they're all at different angles, you're coming in like this or like that, and you really run the risk of touching the headstock, okay?
Sure, okay, which, on this guitar might not be the end of the world, but you can get finished headstocks where it's
Yeah, well, that stems from working on other people's guitars.
Absolutely, absolutely. I've done a fair amount of work on other people's guitars myself in the past, and you've definitely got to be that extra bit careful. Not saying you shouldn't with your own, but it does add an element of risk to it.
So I'm just going to carry on with the A. I'm going to do it exactly the same way. I'm just pulling the string through. I've made sure it's tight, ball end's tight against the block. I'm just going to go 1, 2 and a half. Pull the string back.
Sure. So
put a kink in it.
Let's have another look at that. So
shall I show you the measurement?
Yeah, go for the measurement. So 2.5.
Yeah, 2.5 to 3.
Sure.
I mean, as you can see, you'll get a uniform sort of 3 wraps around the tuning post. And so as that starts to turn the corner, I'm able to pull back a little bit on with my right hand. As it goes, the string goes over.
Yeah.
The kink of the string goes over. I just keep the pressure on.
Sure. So that's this sort of right hand technique is actually pretty key to the whole thing, really. I mean,
it's quite important so you don't cross over that string.
Sure. Yeah.
And also keeping the tension on means it's tight around the tuner. That means that hopefully throughout its lifetime being on a guitar, it won't slip.
Sure.
Okay. And then just wind. And once it's going down and you can keep that tension on.
Yeah.
You can just wind very quickly.
Great. Lovely. So yeah, that's
continuing on with the D. This would be the first one, which is on the Staggered tuner.
Okay. So we'll have another.
So we're going to have to measure.
Slightly different.
We're going to have to measure this differently because you won't be able to get 3 wraps around it.
Yeah, of course.
And that's sort of the point with this larger head, that the string won't go up the tuner. Okay.
Sure. I see.
So I'd suggest just probably 1 tuner's width.
Okay.
Okay, or length.
We are.
And you still want to leave a little bit out so you can cut it cleanly.
Of course, yeah, I see.
And we still do exactly the same with, whilst turning the string, pulling slowly back on the tuner. And then once it's gone round, we can let it wrap. And even with just with the 1 length, tuner length, you can see we've got 1.5 to 2 wraps around that tuning post.
Okay, perfect.
Okay, so with the lower staggered tuning head, the break angle's already sort of promoted off the back, but we still have a small wrap around there. Okay.
So that break angle there, you can see that now we've put a couple of strings on there. But
yeah.
The break angle, you can see it here on the E string.
Yeah, it's quite sort of exaggerated on the E string.
Yeah, yeah, but it's looking very, very healthy.
Good.
Well done. Okay, cool. So this is the first non-wound string, and when we say wound string, we mean the kind of scratchiness that you get from the winding, which is the
yeah. So it's slightly thinner. The next 2 will be 2. I'm still going to only do a tuner's length on this, as it's a staggered modern tuning machine. Okay.
Yeah.
So put a kink in it. Try leave it out so you can cut it clean.
So just to be clear, if you don't have these sort of staggered modern ones, then still go for the 2.5.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And as you're going up to the unwound strings, you can be fairly flexible with that. It can easily be 3 tuning machines length. Okay, so it's still got a good 2 wraps around that tuning post. Okay, so they're not quite as bad as I thought.
Yeah, we were slightly concerned when looking at stringing up this guitar that there wouldn't be quite enough space on these tuners, but turns out they're pretty much fine.
So now onto the B. This is where I tend to swap hands, right?
Okay.
So we put the thumb and index finger behind the tuning post and pull it back to measure. Okay.
So basically here you've essentially run out of space to measure.
Yeah, I mean if you were having to do 3, you'd certainly run out of space. Sure. Here you've only got to have to do sort of 1 and a bit.
Sure.
But
so just clarify that technique. So at the moment we've got the B string is pretty, not tight, but it's tight to sort of pull tight.
And then pinch the string with your thumb and index finger and just pull the string out a tuner and a bit.
So you're still measuring a tuner and a bit, but you're essentially measuring it the other way.
Yes.
Just because you've got no space.
Yeah.
Awesome.
The high B and E are a little bit trickier to hold on to because they're unwound. I mean, the G is a little bit better because it's slightly thicker, but that's just gone under, and now we can just wind that up. I've still got the tension on it. Okay, it's still quite important.
Perfect. And why is it important to keep that tension on?
So there's no gap around that tuning post.
Okay.
Okay. That could lead to some slippage later down the line.
Okay.
So again, I'm just going to pull that string back.
Sure.
Put a little kink in it. Once it starts to wind, this is where you have to just be slightly careful.
Being careful to keep it underneath there.
Yep. And
keeping it all in line.
once the first wind's gone over, you can then speed up.
I see.
Okay, I'm keeping my index finger on there just to keep that angle right.
Keep the angle right.
Now I can get it under the string tree.
Perfect.
And just cut that.
Brilliant.
Okay, so there we have all of them done. A good amount of wrap, an even amount of wrap on the first 2, which are your standard modern tuners. On the Staggered, we were still able to get a small amount of wrap. Okay, but in measuring them, what we're able to do is that's pretty uniform.
Okay.
And so it looks fairly purposeful, right? And the angle is as good as it will be off the back of this nut. And that's it. The next thing would be to tune the guitar up.
Absolutely, and it's looking very, very neat. And something that we didn't really cover, but is very important, and you see wrong on a lot of beginners' guitars, is that the winding needs to go the correct way around the tuning peg.
Sure.
So if you, I mean, you can kind of work it out if you look at it and sort of think about it. You can sort of work it out and see which way it's going to go. But if you start to see it going the wrong way, keep an eye on it and immediately stop. Wind back around the other way. Yeah?
Also, I'd say on this style of guitar, with this 6-in-line tuners, when they go the wrong way, they tend to do a left over the tuning, over the nut. Right, so they come round this way.
Okay.
So the line is as straight as it can be over the nut on those particular types of guitars. So that's a good pointer. But also, it's anti-clockwise.
Okay, fair enough.
As a general rule.
Sure, I see. Perfect. And with them being sort of straight, I guess that's good for kind of tuning stability. I mean,
and I suppose they're the resonance and sustain of the guitar.
Perfect, of course, because it's essentially when you play the guitar, these bits are, that's resonating sort of in the background, keeps the string vibrating.
Sure.
In the same way, I guess that the springs are on the back of this.
Yeah, I mean that's an element of goes into the tone of these types of guitars. Sure.
Okay, so that's us on the Strat with the modern style tuners. Next, we're going to have a look at the Fender vintage style.